These meetings of finance ministers are just, they're not much more than for show. I mean, they get together and they have their parties and so forth, and they have some committees, and it's mostly political to begin with. And if you think these people, which are elitists, are going to say that it's the distribution of wealth that's the problem, they're not. I mean, they're perfectly happy with it. So, okay, the other thing that the large distribution or maldistribution of income have is, I don't know if any of you can remember, it was 3 or 4 years ago, the Treasury sent everybody like a $300 check. Okay. And they thought that was going to stimulate spending. But it didn't. Well, why didn't it? Well, the people who got that $300, they either used it to pay on their next mortgage payment, maybe, or in other ways, they just paid down their debt. And for this so-called multiplier effect, it's talked about in the Keynesian effect, you have to spend it on goods, not paying off debt. So it just didn't work. And in fact, they give you the feeling that if you're paying off debt, somehow or other you're being unpatriotic. Because they want you to spend, spend, spend. So it didn't work. And it didn't work. It won't work until people get back at a safe level of debt. It's going to be several more years. So this case is so unemployment, as far as coming back and staying up and getting and sustaining interesting, it's going to take some work. Okay, and finally, what are the solutions to this? Okay, I said, well, the number one solution is unequal distribution. Well, there's a lot of them. Some of them are revolutionary. I don't know why, if I want to really outline those right here. I don't know who's watching or listening, but some of them truly are. But there's some that have been used in history, and I'll take the example of in Jewish tradition, and this is actually discussed in the Bible. They had a tradition called Jubilee, and it depends on who's interpreting it, but every 5, some say 50 years, all property would be redistributed back to the original owners. Start all over again. And I liken this to playing Monopoly. You know, I'll play Monopoly, and it tells us good stories about economics. And there's somebody that ends up all the hotels and all the good spots, and before you know it, they're the only ones that are having fun. And you know that they got that way just for mostly luck. And so you say, I don't want to play anymore, or let's start a new game.
You throw the board.
Well, in this case, after a jubilee, you're starting a new game. You may have new winners and so forth. So that was a solution that the Jews did. Another solution is just to tax the rich. But how's that going to happen with the Republicans we have and even the Democrats we have? That's not too viable. So, furthermore, if we can go back, and my favor, without getting myself locked up, is to go back to when I was talking about how people trying to maintain their standard of living, even in declining income, in that scenario, they were losing money, but they were losing money to their creditors, members of the elite, or the 1%. Okay? So you talk about how did the 1% get so much more wealthy? Well, they're getting the money from the 99%. Legally, in this case, it's just a interest rates
some of the group already split and took off.
But the effect was widening of the income distribution.
Okay. Yeah, he's on his final topic.
The best solution of this, maybe I ought to read this. I don't know where it is to basically eviscerate Wall Street. Just reestablish Glass-Steagall. No more subsidies to Wall Street. Enforce the antitrust laws. And that would do a lot towards leveling the playing field. And that was all. I don't think any of those are particularly revolutionary. Yes?
How do you see the cycling of who is sitting within that 1% spot and kind of dictating what the money is going to be used for, what they're going to grow out of humanity? How do you see that, whereas it used to be, royalty and family lineage, a very slow rotation to something that's maybe faster now? How do you see that affecting wealth distribution?
I'm on hard time here. I'm a bit hard.
The cycling of who is on top of the heap, who's owning banks and whatnot, how quickly that can change from back in history when that was family lineages to now when it's who's the CEO for a few years or something. How do you see that affecting wealth distribution?
Well, there's an argument at the very top.
I can't hear you.
This is like a floating crab pool. Somebody gets to the top and they don't stay there very long. The natural forces pull them down and somebody comes up. Is that kind of what you meant?
Somewhat, yeah. The ability to distribute wealth for how it would. Okay, if it's like this, there's 1% at the top.
Yeah.
That 1% used to be royalty, used to be a family lineage. It couldn't just be like a rehire. Now we're in a corporate system where you're able to. Okay, basically my question is, it used to be the top people that ran money and whatnot was royalty, something like that, a king that was family lineages or a power coup in order to change. That took a long time. Those wheels turned a lot slower. Now it could be a CEO of a bank that's able to control that, which could be a few years before that's a new person. How do you see that cycling of who's in charge of the power affecting wealth distribution?
I think you can look at the top as two different groups. Those who have political power and the means to maintain it. They can keep at the top pretty well. But then the other, you got like a great athlete. Now the economics of great athletes is quite a bit different. Like when Michael Jordan was playing basketball, he could draw millions and millions of fans, and each fan pays a nickel to Michael Jordan. That's a lot of nickels. Great entertainers. They have the ability that they can sell their services not one by one, but to whole masses at a time. And even though one of these masses, like I say, pays a nickel, there's so many people out there that adds up. But that's kind of a special case. And of course, these athletes don't maintain their status forever. They get old and they go bankrupt. But the idea that people, other than athletes, which truly are gifted individuals, in my view, it's pretty much a myth that Joe Sixpack can get a degree, starting down at the bottom and end up at the top. It's just not the way it is.
Do we have any historical evidence, any real historical evidence of here, let me come here. Do we have any real historical evidence of countries or nations that really have a good distribution?
Oh, he's standing in front of the speaker, so.
I can't hear you more.
Feedback.
Yeah, so, I mean, do we have any historical examples of countries or peoples that have done this well? Because we're obviously doing it really poorly. What is it? Where are examples of that?
Let me give you examples of numbers I just looked at on these numbers would have to be fudged around a bit to get directly at your problem. But I picked up a thing I thought was interesting from the internet, and had the CEO pay relative to ordinary worker pay was 11 to 1 in Japan. CEO got $11 for an ordinary worker got $1. Germany, it was 12 to 1. Now Germany and Japan both work well. They have good industrial sectors. And I don't know that much about Germany, but Japan has a fairly equal distribution of income and so forth. But then you go down the list and you get to Mexico, and it's 47 to 1. Well, 47 to 1, I mean, that's pretty bad. And we know that Mexico is a highly unequal society. Okay, well, we keep coming down to the big daddy, and that's the United States. In the United States, the ratio of CEO pay to ordinary worker pay is 475 to 1.
470?
475. Okay, now, is that saying that American CEOs, if you divide like 475 by 11, does that mean American CEOs are 43 times more productive than their Japanese or German counterparts? Well,
That much more green,
that,
right?
as I said before, that's American exceptionalism to the extreme. We truly are the best people on earth.
The biggest headed.
Yeah. So, well, the way these high salaries for U.S. executives, of course, they have the hand of the financial sectors. They have options on and all kinds of tricks that they use. But if we go back to my idea, we've got to starve the financial system. We've got to bring them back to a point where they're making loans to mom and pop businesses. Right now, when they talk about loans were frozen, they talk to loans to other banks. Because no credit, but that meant credit. I mean, Bank of America wouldn't loan to Chase America or Chase Manhattan. Because the fact of the matter is, these banks are mostly become like a hedge fund. They don't. If you withdraw your money out of them, I think that's a good idea. If for only one reason, it helps the credit unions. And the credit unions do what they should. They finance middle America. But the big banks long ago, they gave up on that. They're just hedge funds, basically. They might have a little, they'll have a little consumer base, just so they can, and it'll be covered by the FDIC, an insured thing, so that they can exploit that. Okay. Another thing is, speaking of banks and how I'd like to cut them down to size, Nicholas Taleb wrote a book a couple of years ago called The Black Swan. And he wrote another one was better technically called Fooled by Randomness a couple of years before, and I read them both.